Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland, and I'm one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. Tonight, Mark Zaid is with me, and we are going to seriously nerd multitude of legal issues in episode 5 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier: The Truth. Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
I'm great, and I'll just start out with saying this was a fun episode. This was what I wanted to see. And it was very emotionally satisfying. What did you think of episode 5?
All right, so I enjoyed it, but preparing for this is undermining all of my enjoyment of all the episodes for every time we do this. Right? I did a podcast the other day about my day job as a national security lawyer, and we were talking a little bit about collectibles that I own, like you could see behind me, military memorabilia, comic book memorabilia, and we were talking all serious national security stuff. And one of the hosts of the show, at the end, I started talking about Stargate and Star Wars and Star Trek. And the host said, I just got to point out, we've been talking for an hour, and the first time that Mark actually smiled was because it was audio, it wasn't video. We were on video. The first time he smiled was when he started talking about Star Trek and Stargate. And I mentioned that I did this type of legal analysis of these shows. So swings back around to what your simple question was. Yeah, if I watched it as an episode, I enjoyed it. But as I'm looking to analyze little nuances of it, I start to realize why did they do that? Did they really do that? That is so ridiculously absurd and unrealistic, and more importantly, an unforced error, because they didn't need to do that. They could have done it right, but instead they chose not to. So now I'm annoyed with the episode, but I liked it. It was a good episode.
Yeah, I wrote a fiery piece on why the Patch Act would be unconstitutional and how it's so devoid of reality. And yet, despite that, and having high blood pressure when I wrote it, I didn't like it. And because of that great fight scene at the beginning and the training montage, like that worked well for me. But I know we're going to get into this with the legal analysis because it's so intertwined with the story. The big legal issues just don't make any sense, and that can be a buzzkill for people like you and I as we watch this and going like, they can't forcibly remove people from their homes. Like, this is you just, and again, let's break that down.
Yeah, or looking through, and it's one thing, and anyone who was a Lost fan, a fan of the TV show Lost, is well aware of keeping track of storyline bullet points to make sure that they tie it all together at the end of the show over those years, which is why if I ever see the people, I used to go to when I went to San Diego Comic-Con, there'd be a Lost panel, and I loved it. And, the actors were there, and the director and the writers, and I remember them saying how they have written out the entire show for 7 years, and it's all going to make sense. And they lied. They absolutely lied, because the storyline sucked. So anyone's out there, don't watch Lost. But when we now talk about Winter Soldier and Falcon and Winter Soldier, there's some legal underlying storylines that we're going to definitely talk about tonight that they are definitely not connecting them. And they probably, it went right over the top of their head, and they don't care about it with respect to the storyline at all. Because I doubt the final episode next week is going to address or resolve this one particular, actually more than one, a few particular issues.
Yeah, and I have a feeling we're gonna that we have the same feeling about it. So let's get there. So we start out with John Walker on the run, and Bucky and Sam confront him. And as I was watching this, I was thinking, what's the intent here? Are they trying to do a citizen's arrest, or are they just going to mug him for the shield? And it was really tough to get into it because they clearly beat the crap out of him to apprehend him, and then they just leave him there. I don't know if there was other forces outside that then arrested Walker and brought him in for beheading someone in public, because we don't like that for a whole bunch of reasons. And in a world where we do have police body camera footage of police killing people, it's similar to that, except this is like Captain America beheading someone. That you don't walk that off. So was this, I get the citizen's arrest idea, or if they are acting under some legal authority, since it's kind of quasi that Falcon is acting under some, part of the United States government or Air Force. But if they just took the shield, this looks more like a mugging. Like, what was your reaction to this?
Yeah, well, my cat wants to know what's going on as well. There lots of issues were coming up with that. Again, and we talked about this when I was on for the first night. All of the operations that are happening overseas, as if we as Americans can engage overseas and do whatever we want in every foreign country without any repercussions whatsoever. And in fact, I was reading a story in, I think it's in either New York Times or the Washington Post today, about some issues that I'm connected to work-wise, national security-wise, and there was some discussion about actually something similar, a SEAL team operation that was going to happen to rescue an American hostage overseas, and everything was a green light, and then at the last minute, they realized the Pentagon realized no one had secured permission from the country in which the American was being held hostage, and they had to rush to get that, because we generally don't go into other countries without permission. There are examples. Death of bin Laden, didn't tell Pakistan, obvious reasons why. We kidnap people from Mexico, stuff like that. But generally speaking, no, we don't. So here we are, we're in Latvia in the fighting scenes, as I understand and recall. Walker has now, in front of everybody, on dozens of cell phone cameras, beheaded a foreign national, no doubt in violation of the laws of Latvia, I'm pretty sure. And then, of course, in the scene in now episode 5, he is about to do the same thing to Sam if Bucky hadn't stopped him. So he has now tried to kill an Avenger as well. I'm not sure if he, as the new Captain America, is an Avenger. I don't think so. So there's all sorts of things, of issues that come up as to what laws have been violated, what would happen. I mean, Latvia can take jurisdiction over him. I don't know. I didn't have a chance to check to see if Latvia's had signed on to the International Criminal Court or not. But it's a little bit unclear, but I presume Walker is still an active, until this episode, on active duty in the military, which, and we're going to get to it about this weird council, whatever the heck that was. But, he would obviously have faced court-martial charges, for a whole host of matters. But, nothing happens to the guy at all.
Yeah, it drove me nuts, because on one level, the fight is beautiful. I mean, it's well done. It's not all dark, like, masks are off so you can see faces, and it's very kinetic. And the breaking Walker's arm, it's like that was super brutal. And I can imagine people going, "Ow!" Like, as that happened the first time they were watching it. But yeah, it really rubbed me wrong with, they're just leaving him there. Like, that's not a good thing, because I mean, I get disarming him for the shield because he's just used a deadly weapon to murder someone in broad daylight. We we don't like that. But the cleanup just is really bad. I mean, if they had like as they were walking away, if U.S. troops had moved in to apprehend Walker, that could have been a quick way to have at least cleaned up what was their intent. Because if this turns into they just wanted the shield back, that's super problematic because it looks like a mugging at that point.
And at least based, I mean, look, it is very clear the storyline of how Walker gets back to the United States is just left for us to guess. We have no idea. Did he just get on a commercial flight? Did he go on a military flight back home? What did he do? Was he taken in custody at all? Presumably not. And the fact that Joaquin Torres has no idea when he's, and we'll get to this because the other issues with it, he's looking in the bag. He's like, what happened, to your wings? So he had no idea at all. So it really just looks like they took the shield and they left him there. I know where that is, who knows? And again, where are the Latvians? Where's the international forces? Where's the where's anybody?
Yeah, it was just sloppy storytelling. It was either, 10 seconds of editing could have fixed it if we had seen Walker being taken into custody.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we just needed to see some troops going in with zip ties or manacles and taking them in. That would have solved this big mystery of like, what did they do and what was the plan? Because that's just weird. Now, you raised the point because for those of you who don't know, we create a Google Doc and then we trade ideas back and forth. And Mark, you really hulked out with some of the other issues with this of not just Walker being prosecuted in Latvia, but also with Sam and Bucky. Like, did they have a conspiracy? And is there other charges that could have been brought for the attempted murder of both Bucky and Sam in the fight that they had?
Well, and even before that, it is still unclear. And this episode, frankly, only, in my mind, muddled things further as to what the hell are Sam and Bucky with respect to their roles that they are playing. Sam is the Falcon. Bucky is the Winter Soldier. Who do they work for? Are they on their own? Because when we started the series, we're not being led to believe that that's the case. I mean, Bucky's not supposed to be doing anything. And, we need to talk about his parole, which let's put a pin and remember to talk about that because everybody seems to have forgotten that the guy's on parole and has specific requirements that he clearly is not keeping. But Sam was apparently working as some sort of agent, contractor, unclear role with the U.S. government, particularly with the military, which we again see when he's meeting with Torres, who, of course, is the only one that seems to be there every time Sam is, or he interacts with Sam. So I don't know who, what he's doing, who he responds to, because he's a junior guy.
Yeah,
got to be responding to somebody, but they seem to be operating on their own, and I don't get it. It's just what you were talking about. It's just so sloppy from a story writing standpoint. If you give it any thought, if you just watch it superficially, I enjoy it. It's great. But if you drill down even a little bit, so much of the story collapses.
It's like, were they out of actors? Like, did they blow the budget on special effects and fight choreography and go like, we can't have anyone that Torres is working with, so it's just Team Torres. And, the one guy that we thought was the Secretary of Defense is actually a senator. And we see him 2 other times. That doesn't make sense. And we'll get there, but it's super, super weird. on that, so we're at a crossroads. First, let's talk Torres, and then let's talk Bucky and parole. So there's this discussion between Sam and Torres about taking jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And again, that raises the question, who is taking jurisdiction?
Right.
Is it the CIA? Like, what are we doing here? Who's calling the shots now? And I understand, like, let's just play it's, spook central, and, the big government is now just handling it. But, let's get your thoughts on the flag smashers and the international incident of beheading a terrorist in public.
Right. And let's take one step back. We started to talk about, the notion of, first, Walker could be prosecuted for this fight with Sam and attempted murder and Bucky. But even before, even though when they meet with the flag smashers, and obviously Sam is trying to do this in a very diplomatic way, making progress, and then Walker screws it all up and then kills the flag smasher, as we've talked about. Bucky and Sam were part of that. They were part of that enterprise. And, conceivably, they could have been possibly brought up on conspiracy charges as well. I mean, not to say they don't have factual defenses, not to say that, no one might ever prosecute them, but it was a combined sort of joint operation that they were engaged in. And, I don't pretend to be a criminal defense lawyer. I've handled criminal cases, some very high profile, including court-martials with various, with the Marines in particular, Marines and Air Force in particular, including for war crimes. But most of us would know, and certainly lawyers would know, even just from law school, that, you don't have to intend to hurt someone, and if your compadre does, there's this felony liability that attaches because of what the other person does. The guy who sits in the car at the bank robbery and the guy inside who shoots the teller, the guy who's in the car who didn't even realize anybody had a gun with them is still could be on felony murder charges. So that could be a big issue. But what you're talking about, the jurisdiction, I just kind of laughed. That was, I think, probably one of the first times where I just started to lose it a little bit, because here it is. Walker decapitates somebody. At least we assume that's what he did. But he certainly did something pretty significant to this guy's head. And Sam thinks he's going to, and they're in a foreign country, and Sam thinks that they're going to control it and is shocked about the fact that, I put it in quotes, they're taking jurisdiction, because Torres says, well, this is international incident big. Captain America killing somebody in front of everybody publicly. I mean, what did Sam think he was going to do? Even if he was with all the Avengers, I mean, for God's sake, he went through the whole accord,
Civil War.
the Civil War and the Soviet Accords and everything, and he was imprisoned, and he thinks that this would not be an issue, that somehow he can control it, the two of them. Come on.
Yeah, it's like, just Sam's smarter than that. It's like him leaving the cell phone on. Like, he's smarter than that. He shouldn't be doing that. And so yeah, we both had the same reactions, because again, this is one of those things. I love it, but it gives me high blood pressure at times when moments like that happen. And this episode has like 2 or 3 more of those moments of like, dude, talk to a lawyer before you write that and then film it. And you know what? There are guys like us who would literally pick up the phone if asked.
For free.
Yeah, for free. It's like, yeah,
just
we would be
credit at the end, associate producer credit.
Yeah, it's like, or send us a T-shirt, like, from the rap party. Like, we would be more than grateful for anything like that. That said, yeah, it does have the migraine moments of like, are you kidding? So let's before we get into some of the other issues, let's talk Bucky and parole. because I think I have a no prize answer for that. Because when Bucky was arrested, because there was the warrant out for him for missing his probation, or excuse me, his therapy session, Walker's the one who gets him out, and Walker's makes some boast at the police station about Bucky being needed and he's out on captain's orders, which again really conflates the authority that Walker had as Captain America to try to make a request like that would modify somebody's conditional parole. But I think that's the no prize for how he's out right now, or that it's still within a week from his last session.
It will be interesting to see in the final episode if they touch upon this at all, because I'm betting that this is a storyline that has just moved on completely. But look, that happens in series for sure. And look, you got 6 episodes, the 45 minutes to an hour. You only got so much you can put into it. But we're not the ones who made that therapy and parole discussion so significant in the first episode. They chose to do so. And they had a very detailed conversation and scene between Bucky and his therapist, emphasizing what his parole requirements were, like not violating the law. Well, wow. I think we got a lot of problems with that since the first episode, or not causing anybody harm. Okay. That's fallen by the wayside too. And it's on camera a whole bunch of times as well. So
it's like he didn't kill anyone, so yay. It's very, again, it's weird because they do a great setup, and the amount of character development that we saw with Bucky in the first 2 episodes and dealing with PTSD and a type of trauma that doesn't exist in real life. Somebody being taken in and out of suspended animation for decades and getting ECT, like that doesn't happen. People have true trauma, and they're, like that is real. So, but again, it's just super, super funky.
Yeah, they're real. Like there are, because we can always look back to Law and Order episodes, and there were Law and Order episodes that dealt with people who killed while they were psychotic, and then when they were back on their medication so they could stand trial, they remember everything they did when they were psychotic and murdered people. I remember one particular episode that's on my mind, because the guy was, when he was on medication, he was normal completely, and he was apparently, a really law-abiding guy, and he was talking about how horrific this is. He remembers, he remembers what he did to this person when he was in the psychotic stage, which is what, of course, has been discussed with Bucky. It's mentioned, in fact, in this episode, that in a good way, in a good and bad way, at the end, when he and Sam are talking, where Bucky is saying that he remembers everything he did as the Winter Soldier, which means that part of him is still inside. But it's also bad because, as Sam asks, are you still having the nightmares? And he truthfully now responds to the contrary of what he told his therapist in the first episode. Yes, every day.
Oh, that's because Sam is just super trustworthy, and he's also good at that and getting people to talk about their trauma more so than I guess the doctor, and maybe that's from common experiences that they had, but it definitely shows. So let's get into some of the other issues, and that's Sam retaking the shield. Sam says to Walker, give me back the shield. And it raises the question, if Sam was just trying to disarm Walker, that's one thing. If Sam is trying to reclaim the shield on other legal grounds, that's a different issue. And the first thought I had was there a deed of gift to the Smithsonian? kind of like with the America's Cup of, like that's controlled by a deed of gift that says this is how it's supposed to work. Did Sam have something along those lines? Did he call Pepper and a Stark lawyer helped him write up a deed of gift to the Smithsonian saying like this is supposed to be on display as to honor Steve Rogers, and that's where it's supposed to be. And if we have something like that take place and the government then turns around and issues it to John Walker, like then the deed of gift has been violated and we have a breach of contract type action. If it's in a different category that sounds more like a mugging, we're in a different situation here. And again, what's your take on that? Because again, we're talking bundle of sticks from property rights here.
Well, I have represented collectors who have donated items to the National Archives and the U.S. government, and I've donated items to the Holocaust Museum, which is pseudo government and private. In the real world, I guarantee you are 100% right. There's a deed of gift that Sam executed with the Smithsonian. I've dealt with the Smithsonian's lawyers, so I know they have a general counsel's office. And, and we'll get into a little bit the fact of what's her name from Seinfeld, Madam Hydra. Who comes, or I guess we can link it in now, she whispers to Walker, it's a state secret that it's a legal gray area as to who owns the shield, which goes to what we talked about the first week, no doubt, in the sense of, well, did Tony Stark's dad, we know from the movies that he made the shield, but did he make the shield as part of Stark Enterprises or Stark Industries, whatever it was, or as a contractor, work for hire for the U.S. government? That's too much in the weeds for any of these storylines to address. But for what we're talking about is crucial, absolutely crucial. Who owns Superman, right? Does Schuster own Superman, or is it a work for hire and DC National Periodicals own Superman? And the answer is DC National Periodicals own Superman. It was a work for hire. $130, 10 pages. So easy legal question. But, for this one, now I suppose maybe if I had represented Sam and I had done the deed of gift to the Smithsonian, I would have worded it that I would have had a clause in there that says the purpose of this is that it will remain on display at the Smithsonian in perpetuity, other than, if there's an act of war or force of nature or something like that, so that the fact that they then, whoever, gave the shield to Walker, in my legal world, would have nullified the deed of gift and it would have reverted back to Sam. So let's assume Sam had a good lawyer, and so the shield is his again.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I did not know that you did that professionally, but I'm not surprised. So that's a bit being in DC naturally. So, but again, at this point, I do want to say seeing Julia Louis-Dreyfus as the Contessa, that was glorious. I did not see that happening. It raises funky issues with the way they told stories in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., because they did have the Leviathan and Hive storyline that was really protracted. And again, I have all kinds of issues with the writing that took place in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But this cameo was worth it just because I adore the actress, and it was fun to see her.
She complained about her heels are not meant for walking or made for walking, which was, of course, a takeoff of a Nancy Sinatra song from 1968. But I'm not sure why that was there. But the heels were not made for walking. Maybe we'll see her as the Contessa, whether she can do the dance as Elaine in Seinfeld. Maybe there'll be an episode about that.
If we get Zemo dancing, maybe we could do a social media movement, because that would be priceless. And who knows, she could have improv that line. Like, that might not have been planned.
No, I wouldn't doubt it. I have to go back and look, but I bet you she probably like tripped her a little bit or something on it, but she kept going with it and then just added that in, and they just like, yeah, well, let's just keep it. It's sure, why not? You're probably right.
Yeah, I wouldn't be, again, because she has comedy chops, and if she was walking in those thinking like, my God, this sucks, that could have happened. But the way that she just reveled in the role was so fun. It wasn't the way I envisioned the character from the comics. I envisioned the comic version as more kind of the assassin from Finishing School. Like she just very different personality type. That said, what happens in the comics doesn't always translate to the small screen or big screen. And I was delighted to see her and the casting for the character.
And then this isn't a legal issue. This is a policy thing. And most of these times I can completely understand why they did it the way they did it from a film perspective. A lot of details just get glossed over because it's going to be too complicated to explain. But I can tell you, having been before, we're going to talk about what the heck this council was, because that really bothered me. But
oh God,
we're going to talk about that. But when her character, the Countess, came in, I'm just I'm already blood pressure, as you're saying, high blood pressure after this whole council scene. That's already thrown me for a loop as I'm trying to understand what the hell this was. But then Walker and his wife are sitting in the hallway of the building, presumably where he had just testified, appeared. I'm not sure what that was. And having testified before Congress before, having represented people who have testified before Congress in high-profile matters, as this clearly would have been, he and his wife are sitting alone in the hallway for the Contessa to come walking over? No, that's not how it works. There would have been vultures from the press, and I say that lovingly because I represent the press all the time. There would have been media all over him and handlers all over him. I mean, we're still trying to figure out, okay, why are you not in handcuffs and being prosecuted for everything you've done? But in any event, you're still military, I think. I'm not quite sure what we're going to talk about a little bit about this in a minute, but I'm just trying to figure out, how did he walk down the hallway and nobody else talked to him other than he's sitting there with his wife quietly in the hallway?
Yeah, I was having the yell at the screen moment myself because there's so many things wrong with the council. And let's get into that. And for the record, for everyone watching, one of the lawyers who loves to blog and podcast with us is Thomas Harper. He's now in private practice, but he's a JAG officer in the U.S. Army, so now reserve. I asked him to do a post about this because I'm sure he will. He hasn't seen the episode yet. He said he was like behind one or two, but I'm sure he's going to have the vein come out of his neck when he watches it because this is so wrong. So here's why the lawyers freak out when we were watching this council that's a mix of a U.S. senator and members of the armed forces telling John Walker he's not going to get court-martialed. They've stripped him of his retirement. He's getting an other than honorable discharge, and they're throwing him out of the military. No, demand the court-martial. They don't get to do a summary proceeding to throw somebody out of the military like that. Walker still has rights, and he still killed a dude in public as a member of the U.S. military. That's not a mulligan. Like, that's something that would take a pardon from the president. And at that point, we're talking My Lai type pardon because people feel bad for him. And that shouldn't be happening here. So that's high level. Digging in lower, what the hell does a senator have to have this hearing? It'd be one thing if it was in the U.S. Senate and it's the Armed Services Committee or the Foreign Intelligence Committee, and they sent him a subpoena to show up and talk about, what did you do? Like, that's the power of Congress. They get the subpoena power and they can compel Walker to show up. The Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Army, on down, they wanted to have a hearing with Walker. That's one thing, because I'm sure there would be a strong desire to scream at him. But Walker still has rights and should have demanded a court-martial, because they're taking away his rank, his retirement. Like, they can't just do that at the stroke of a pen. And Mark, since you've represented people in court-martials, did you have similar reactions or feelings to this?
I was throwing, not just yelling at the screen. I was like throwing things at the screen, because I'm going, what the hell is this? And this is, again, this gets to what I would mention in the very beginning. Unforced error.
Yeah.
Didn't need to be this way. So easy for them to have accomplished the exact same thing they wanted from the scene, but do it in a way that is semi-plausible. It could have come from the President of the United States, meeting with Captain America. I mean, this wasn't as the real Captain America, the original Steve Rogers, where he's a military experiment and, he's run by the military, etc. This was, we're not entirely clear where it came from, and I don't remember how the comics happened years back, but for Walker, but it could have been the president, it could have been the Secretary of Defense, it could have been just some general, some unnamed general, it could have been some hybrid, not necessarily hybrid, a fake entity that was military in nature that they just named would have been fine, because everything we know about Walker is he's active duty military. And so what the hell is this senator doing? And it's not even, I'm trying to figure out, again, from the context of what we just witnessed. He murdered someone in a foreign country. We haven't even touched upon the fact that he took a super soldier serum, and nobody seems to notice this, right? Yet that he's got now this super strength, and nobody seems to be worried about what it's going to do to him, since we now know, because of Mr. Bradley, that not everybody reacts very well to the super soldier serum, and it does. I mean, we don't know enough about Walker from this series to know, were you a psychopath beforehand, or if you did the super soldier serum start turning you into a psychopath? Because it kind of seems like that's a little bit of what they were suggesting in this, that it did psychologically impact him as well as physically. But, I doubt I don't know, maybe we'll see some more development of that. But all right, this senator, what authorities, what is this body? You got a civilian senator flanked by flag officers in an unclassified arena, because Walker's wife is sitting right there. I don't know where this place is. I don't know what the heck it is, because Walker is trying to defend himself. Defend himself what? It's not a hearing. You're standing at a pedestal, whatever.
Yeah, getting yelled at.
Getting yelled at. I don't get it. And they're talking about, and as you mentioned, an other than honorable discharge. Okay, so you can get an honorable discharge, an other than honorable, a bad conduct discharge, and then a dishonorable discharge. And 20 years ago, I represented all these members of the military who were refused the anthrax vaccine and were being prosecuted. And we were doing all these court martials. And at first, they were all just being administratively discharged. And then when we started to actually go into the legal court martial proceedings, some of the guys started to get OTHs, is what they're called, other than honorable discharges, which was a great deal, because really what that just does is you do lose, as was mentioned, certain benefits, like the GI Bill you wouldn't have access to. But you don't lose, as far as I understand, all your benefits. I think like you could go to the VA for medical treatment and things like that. You just lose certain benefits, but not all. You lose your rank. I don't know what the heck the senator was talking about. No, maybe they could strip him of his rank, but that's
court-martial material.
I mean, I have worked on cases where generals. I worked on one case back in the late 1990s where a sexual harassment case, and I represented the victim, and the general was a 2-star general and was conspiring to destroy this woman who was his colonel's wife. And when it was found out, he was court-martialed, and as part of the penalty, they took away one of his stars. So they took away that rank. But it's of course not clear from this designation about what the heck this senator is talking about with doing it. And the whole thing didn't make sense. And my final point on this, and I'll throw it back to you. He talks about that if I wrote this down, if Walker continues to be demeaning or denigrating the priorities and dignity of this council, that he's going to be thrown in the U.S. disciplinary barracks. The U.S. disciplinary barracks? What the hell is that?
And also, have the senator not heard of the First Amendment?
Right.
Because Walker can go out and say, that was messed up, and I'm angry, and they're a bunch of clowns, and that's protected because First Amendment. Now, if it's putting on a Captain America outfit and murdering people, that's a different thing that they could go after him for. But there's still going to be a First Amendment issue. And like this just doesn't make any bloody sense, because
all he had to do was say, if you do things that violate your non-disclosure agreements, or if you do anything that violates the secrets we had bestowed upon you, you will find yourself in Leavenworth. I mean, yeah. Most people know, they've heard of Leavenworth in movies before. It's a military prison, an Army military prison, not the U.S. disciplinary barracks. What is that?
So horrible, because it just, that didn't need much to fix. They have a ton of extras. They couldn't pay somebody else scale to come in to play general or deputy director for the Department of Defense or anything that could have at least made this look right. And again, Marvel Studios has had this issue with senators doing things that they're not supposed to. And that goes to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where that happened a couple times. And it's like a senator going to the UN and making a speech. Doesn't happen. Like they don't do that. Wrong branch of government. So it's just, as much as I love the characters, this gave me heartburn because Walker had rights. And if they were going to, do a kangaroo court, at least do the right kangaroo court. Like give him his day, because he does have defenses. Now, taking the super soldier serum, there's like voluntary intoxication, like it's drug use, like all these other things that, JAG officers could raise in the prosecution of him. But the defenses to that are, he thought it would make him more of what he is, the guy who makes the right decisions in the heat of battle. Well, he's clearly not anymore. We can now have expert witness testify about how it's changed him in the wrong way. And he needs medical treatment because of what's happened to him in the service of his country. All of that would have been far more sympathetic and in an argument lawyers can make. And, granted, he shouldn't carry the shield anymore because of, again, you beheaded the dude. But he's not without legal defense. And that doesn't strip him of his rights, because rights are supposed to apply to the people that we don't like, not just the people that we like, which is why it was so aggravating watching the scene.
It was just so easy to, yes, and scene. It was just so easy to have done differently. And and hit every point that they wanted, keep the storyline going, but make sense and be real.
Yeah, there's enough scenes with court martials or courts of inquiry, and it's like Crimson Tide had one. Like there's a few good men. Like
yes, right.
Yeah,
And look, there were errors in some of those. I mean, a few good men at one point in time cites the wrong article of the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, as part of the court martial. Or I think, oh gosh, I'm blanking on Kevin Bacon's character, if I remember, at one point refers to some manual and he got it wrong. And it's like, oh my God, come on! Clearly, you have lawyers that are guiding you through the process. How did you make such an error? Because it had nothing to do with the scene. I mean, they could have had the right article of the code, and they got it wrong. So it does happen. But boy, wow, it was happening a lot in this episode.
Yeah, and it's one thing they're like, okay, they screwed up the code, or the Daredevil season 1 where they flipped the elements for self-defense. And it's just like saying the prosecution had to disprove it. It's like, no, that's not how it works. But again, they were at least in the ballpark. And it's like, okay, they screwed up, but it was at least an attempt to be correct. Like I can live with they were in the neighborhood and clearly they either got it backwards listening to the lawyer or they made some creative choice. But this is just wrong. And it is so frustrating to watch. But let's move on to who I think is now one of the more complex villains in the Marvel Universe, and that's Zemo. And I'll just, for a shotgun round, Zemo and Wilson Fisk, I think are very complicated villains, and it's very fun to talk about them and their motivations. Now, granted, since they're villains, they get things wrong. So Zemo connecting the dots that super soldier serum equals Captain America, thus equals cities falling out of the sky. He takes a few leaps and they go in the wrong direction. And so like it's a big problem with him. That said, him going to the memorial, Bucky, having paid attention to everything he said, goes to the memorial as well, confronts him, and then he's taken to custody by by our female heroes from Wakanda, and they take him to the raft. So they don't take him to Wakanda for summary execution or trial there. He's already been prosecuted, we're taking him to where he needs to go. Like, this is refreshingly close to being okay. You should get a trial for escaping from prison in the first place, but that's the only new charge to hit him with. What was your reactions to the scene?
Well, of course, I'm still thinking, well, all right, Bucky helped break this guy out of prison. That's a problem. Clearly, definitely violates the parole provisions, without a doubt. Zemo, of course, is the way Zemo has been made in the movie and now the series is different than the Zemo that Captain America dealt with in the comic books, which actually was always one of my more favorite characters because you didn't know who he was for the longest time in the original character, and he was left over from World War II, and I always enjoyed as a kid. In Captain America was one of my favorite characters. So here it is. I'm reading in the early 70s and linking back to World War II. In fact, I used Captain America to persuade my parents that I was learning things from comic books because they were getting concerned that I was reading and dealing with comic books too often. And I remember showing them in 1976. I think it was Captain America Annual 9. I may be off by an issue, but I remember showing it to them in our station wagon, that look, he's speaking German, Ach schnell, and all these things. And and because I'm learning a foreign language, and look, he's fighting it's not World War II Nazis. I'm learning history too. These, and look at all the words, SAT. I probably didn't say SAT because I didn't know what that was when I was 9, but SAT words and stuff like that. But the Zemo, I was just kind of thinking, all right, again, I'm pretty confident that people know that Bucky and Sam have been with Zemo. So what's their obligations? Is not anyone going to ask them, where did Zemo go? What role did you play with Zemo? How does Zemo know everything that he knows? I get what he did in Civil War, but this episode and the one before it all now turns him into this mastermind criminal, which was not what he was portrayed to be in Civil War, right? He's on a vendetta, and coming from Hydra, and we knew, he had an issue with super soldiers since he killed all the Soviet super soldiers in Civil War. So he's got an issue with that, but you're right. He's a far more complex character than we have been, the way Disney and Marvel Universe now has created him. But tons and tons of questions now coming up with his escape and his recapture, which seemed so easy. Also, where he mentioned at the one point, he said something to Bucky about, he's like, you know what you have to do, and Bucky said something, and then Zemo said, yeah, I knew you were going to say that, and he clearly anticipated Bucky was coming after him, and yet for this super hotshot guy who's a super mastermind criminal now, he basically gets taken with ease.
Yeah. So I have thoughts on that go. Maybe he gave up, and he felt that the mission, his mission was accomplished, and that it's up to Sam and Bucky to finish the issue with Carly, and he was content with that. Now I do have big issues with him breaking out of prison and our heroes being part of it. And something my brother mentioned, and I agree with his logic for this, is instead of it being a jailbreak, it should have been 48 hours. They had 72 or 96 hours with him out to go take this mission. Mm-hmm. And he would get X amount of time off a sentence. There have to be a reason for him to want to cooperate, simply besides they're super soldiers and we need your help to stop them. That can't be the only motivation for him. And if they had just changed it that little bit, all the comedic elements would have worked better, because we don't have multiple felonies hanging over the heroes for what happens. I mean, that said, Zemo dancing and the debates that they have, I enjoyed that. Because again, I enjoy a good discussion, being a good lawyer, but he has logical flaws that should have been called out, of one does not equal the other. And, but yeah, that's my 2 cents. I do think the raft is super unconstitutional, but both you and I have written about that on different occasions.
Well, and that raises some interesting questions about, and I'm trying to remember, Bucky knew the Wakandans were going to come after Zemo, obviously, for having killed their king. And when that storyline was first introduced, in I guess just the episode before, the sense was they were getting him to bring him back to Wakanda, and whatever they were going to do. As far as we know, the raft is
international.
Is it international, or is it U.S. government?
That's a good question. And again, one of the issues I have with the raft is that's built in months. A giant submarine prison building a ship takes years. Like it takes a decade to build a Ford-class aircraft carrier. Building a submersible prison that's the size of an aircraft carrier, they had to have started that early. Like that couldn't. So even if it's entirely U.S. and they're just housing people who violate the Sokovia Accords, or they're using it as some international supermax prison, at least it's not private.
Yeah, I mean, but, this is now. It's very interesting that they have tied the Wakandans that direct with either the U.S. or whoever internationally controls the raft, and it also raises a question. I mean, I suppose they would raise it as an issue of. I was just thinking, well, why wouldn't they have put him there in the first place instead of in Germany, in the regular prison population? But I guess now that he escaped, they're like, okay, we got to put you somewhere else. But again, he escaped because he had some
help.
Everybody is ignored. But okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of mulligans that happen in this. It's like, we're just not going to go there. It's too hard. Like we just throw in the towel and move on, which we don't generally do that. Like that's you don't get a mulligan for breaking a guy out of prison, no matter the intent. And even then, there would have to be some prosecutorial discretion going, we're just not going to charge you with that one.
I mean, and look at all the people who died as a result. And in the aftermath, when they went over to
Mandapur.
Yeah.
And it just, there's a huge body count with this. And that's a big mulligan. It's a really big mulligan. Which brings us to the other injustice we hear about with Isaiah Bradley. And I just want to highlight, I watched it the second time with the subtitles on. His grandson is Eli. So in the comics, Eli Bradley becomes the Patriot, part of the Young Avengers. So he gets a blood transfusion from Grandpa eventually to beef him up.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's just, again, the Easter eggs that they're planning with, the Wanda's twins, and then Cassie Lang, Ant-Man's daughter. She'll be Stature. So again, they're planning phase 7, I guess, of the MCU, and with these little breadcrumbs that we're starting to see. And that's just, it's glorious for people who read the Young Avengers to see them planting all the seeds. But again, I do love the actor who plays Isaiah Bradley. And so the injustice level here is he's imprisoned for 30 years because he launched a rescue mission to save his teammates. And the reason he launched the rescue mission was because he heard military leadership planning to blow up the POW camp where the U.S. servicemen were being held. That's messed up on multiple levels. You have a duty to follow lawful orders. And if you find out that your superiors are going to commit unlawful acts in murdering U.S. troops, going out to save the U.S. troops should not put you in prison for 30 years. So again, huge issues there. And I know you identified some as well. So your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a really tough scene to watch for so many different reasons. Obviously, the racial undertones, not even undertones, the obvious racial issues that Isaiah Bradley is raising with Sam in a very interesting way, as they have this dialogue where Sam is like, hey, look, I'm from the South and I'm African American too. I get it. And pretty much Bradley saying, you don't get it. You're a different generation than me. You don't get it. And I'm not going to begin to try and articulate or address as a white Jewish guy the plight of the African Americans in slavery and all sorts of, as Isaiah said, 500 years in the United States. So let's push all that, the race part, to the side. Isaiah Bradley would be the type of client I would represent all the time. In fact, that I do represent. And it raised a lot of interesting questions. And he made some comments during it. So he references red tails and 332. And what that is very likely referring to was the 332nd Expeditionary Operations Group, which was a predominantly black unit of the U.S. Air Force created in World War II. And my sense was, and I think he talked about at one point, that he was in the Korean conflict. I'm trying to remember if I think he had said that.
He did say that,
right, in the fourth episode. So so now we know apparently he's was in the Air Force, which is useful to know. Although actually the Air Force didn't exist yet; it was the U.S. Army Air Corps.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if I forget what year. In World War II, it was the U.S. Army Air Corps. I can't remember exactly. I'd have to.
1947.
47. Okay, so it probably was the Air Force. All right, so that worked out. So you're absolutely right about the unlawfulness. So again, I hearken back to my anthrax vaccine cases, and our arguments were that the order to take the vaccine was unlawful, which meant we had a defense. We do not need to follow unlawful orders. Now, you disobey at your own peril, and clearly Isaiah Bradley found that out. He disobeyed at his own peril, and he was imprisoned for 30 years. Now, there are and I'm going to jump ahead and then jump back. There are a lot of non-legal issues, policy issues that are troubling that with respect to this storyline that really don't make sense, like the notion that some nurse took pity on him and covered and made him die, pretended that he died, and he was able to get out and live his life in Baltimore for 30 years. Or actually, we don't know 30 years. Or he served for 30, let's see. He was probably put in Korean conflict. That meant he got out in like the 80s. And so, yeah, for the last 30 years, he's been in Baltimore, Maryland, under the radar, and nobody knows about him except Bucky, who was the enemy, somehow knows about. No, none of this makes sense again. I'm sorry. Some military prison nurse or something is not going to be able to fake the death of a super soldier and nobody ask any questions. So, okay, again, here's another example of, storyline just doesn't work.
Yeah, if it had been President Reagan pardoned me, like,
right. With the understanding, I was told I could get out if I kept my mouth shut and never said anything about or did anything about it. That would have made perfect sense, and that would not have been the first time a storyline like that has been in the comic books either.
Yeah, because the problem with it's the Luke Skywalker living on Tatooine issue, because has his given name still. He didn't take a fake name.
Right.
So it's like, did you get a job? Did you use your own social security number? Like, this is that's problematic. And did the nurse say, like, what happened to the body? Like, what happened here? Him getting released would have made a heck of a lot more sense for him to, again, be from early 50s to 1981, 82, and to have been released from prison then and go about his life with a conditional parole of some kind.
Yeah.
Like, that would have
no legal ability to do anything. So, he talks about how they, and it's unknown who they refers to, shot up a bunch of them with what he didn't know, but they told them it was tetanus vaccinations. So, this raises a whole bunch of questions about, again, with the super soldier serum, and obviously the attempts of the U.S. government, as well as the Soviets, clearly, to recreate it, and that there was, and of course, what's interesting is that they were successful, apparently, at least with him. So what happened to the program then if it was successful? But pushing that aside, the whole notion, all we're hearing about, this coming through my mind is, this is the Tuskegee Airmen all over again, which for those who don't know was real. I mean, Tuskegee Airmen were real, but the Tuskegee experimentations was U.S. government giving syphilis to African Americans without their knowledge, and not treating them to see what the effects were. And this was intentional, that they made Bradley obviously African American for that purpose, and they were talking about it. And it was also reminding me of a whole storyline involving a man named Frank Olson, who worked for the CIA and killed himself, jumped out of a tall story apartment building because he was being given LSD without his knowledge. And the CIA experimented on a whole bunch of people in the 50s and 60s with hallucinogenic drugs without telling them what it was. In fact, in the 80s, they paid millions of dollars to Canadians who sued the CIA for this experimentation without their knowledge. Frank Olson's family sued also in a couple of times, I think in the 90s or so, never able to succeed. So if I was just thinking during Bradley's storyline, just like Sam was, we need to do something about this. We need to tell your story. And I'm like, you need to hire me as your lawyer. I will sue for you. But there would be lots of problems with it. There's things called the state secrets privilege, which I have had thrown in my face a number of times, that helps the government cover up national security related cases and other type of political question doctrine and all sorts of problems. The Totten doctrine also, which relates to spies working for the U.S. government. The Ferris doctrine, which prohibits military members from suing for issues, and he of course was a military member, so there would have been a lot of issues with any civil litigation he would have tried to pursue. But oh damn, I would have represented him in a heartbeat.
Well, that, and for all the state secret issues that are there, he was experimented on against secretly. Like, they never got medical consent to do this, so they violated the Stockholm and the Helsinki Accords for human rights experimentation, like right out of Mingala type behavior.
Yeah.
So
while we lost all of our court-martial cases with the anthrax vaccine, and everybody and all these Marines I represented, they got BCDs, bad conduct discharges. We then civilly sued the U.S. government, and we prevailed and got a permanent injunction against the Pentagon because the vaccine was deemed experimental, and you cannot give experimental vaccines without an informed consent to the military members. So they totally, just what you're saying, violated Bradley and the others' rights by requiring them to take some sort of medication, vaccinations, without telling them what it was.
Yeah, it's just, let the lawyers go for this, because again, being the discovery guy, we could have some fun. It's like, sure, let's go to civil courts. Look forward to doing this. Let me introduce you to Rule 34, and let the games begin. So,
but I'll tell you, one of the most powerful lines that he said, they will never let a black man be Captain America. And then he added, no self-respecting black man would. Wow, that's really tough. Now, those of us who know the comic books know, well, actually, Marvel did let a black man be Captain America. The Falcon did become Captain America decades ago for a period of time. But this is a totally different, we're in a different time period than we were when the comics were dealing with that issue. And those were probably two of the most powerful lines in this movie, in this series, and I imagine is going to continue to be a recurring theme with Sam as his character is developed in different Marvel universe.
there's some powerful a position from a storytelling perspective, because we have the hell that Isaiah Bradley went through, and then we see Sam's nephews, who call him Uncle Sam, eyeing the shield and looking very proud and interacting with it. So you get the, I think Sam's motivation going like, all right, if I do this, I'm doing it because of, like the next generation looking up and, trying to right the big wrong in a different way. And I really do hope that when we see the, whatever they got him, the uniform and wings from the Wakandans, that, it's similar to his Captain America outfit from the comics. So hope springs eternal, that we'll have some fun with that. But again, it's super, again, like white, me being a white kid from, a middle-class family. My first stepfather was African American and grew up in, LA, and I think Watts during the 60s. So, his dad told him that if he hears sirens, to hide under the bed. That wasn't my childhood. And given current events, we know parents are still telling their kids that today. And it's just, the fact that Marvel's willing to tackle this, I give them a lot of credit, and I'm eager to see where they go with it in the last episode.
Yeah, it is very interesting. This is a kind of side, peripheral, but related issue. I mean, we could do a whole segment just on this. But one of the lectures that I give on comic books is on the history of comic books. And for anyone who's interested, you can actually, if you went to my website, my comic book website, esquirecomics.com, in the news, there's a lecture, a presentation I gave at San Diego Comic-Con back in 2009 about the history of comic books. And I discuss how not only comic books have developed over the century and a half, but also how comics have dealt with certain themes, including war, race, religion, sex, etc. And it is very interesting historically to look at how comics and the comic book companies dealt with certain issues that are dealt with a lot more easily and obviously now. Like this segment, this episode very clearly was taking positions about racial issues and putting in some dynamics there for people, the audience, to come away with a level of discomfort that clearly we did, as any self-respecting person would. But and I would imagine it would be potentially, depending on your race, you might come away with a different feeling from that scene in particular. But it was uncomfortable regardless. But you look back how race was dealt with in comic books. I can go on for a long time about that, but even just about war, just as a quick aside. For example, in World War II, and again, comic books in the World War II era were written for kids, 8 to 15. Now they're written for adults, 27 and older. It's a very different market. But back then, we went to war. The U.S. went to war Europe went to war in 1939. We didn't go to war till the end of 41. Comic books had to deal with war for almost 2 years when we're not part of it. So what do you do with Superman, Captain America, Submariner? The first issue of Captain America in March of 1941 is him punching Hitler. Now, it was Marvel's predecessor, Timely Comics, but I can tell you, until the U.S. government went to war against the Nazis, even though Superman clearly fought Germans, no swastikas. They were U-boats, but no swastikas on the U-boats. Whereas Captain Timely, Marvel's parent company, Submariner, and Captain America and others were taking on Hitler and the Nazis before the U.S. government entered the war. So here you had two different companies that had a different philosophical vision as they were dealing with real-time events. Now, again, today, companies wear this on their sleeve. lot more than it used to be. And this is what we saw here. But, this is clearly, I mean, it's interesting, of course, because it's Disney now that's controlling this storyline and not just, a comic book company. And Disney has a lot more to deal with by way of perception than a comic book company would.
So we at the Kirby Centennial, we did a panel at San Francisco Comic-Con with a couple other lawyers called Kirby on Civil Rights, because Kirby was really good at working in civil rights stories with the stories he helped tell. And when we tackled Captain America, first off, the Captain America cover is in the Smithsonian scenes in the first episode. So like they worked that in as one of the panels on the wall, which was a very nice way to tribute to Kirby and Joe Simon. And Timely Comics had protesters outside upset that, we were, comic books were saying the Nazis were bad. Because you had, you had Nazi events at Madison Square Garden with people called the Bund, and there was the kind of the American Fascist Party, and they had Nazi summer camps, and it was just, just so messed up, and like those guys got into, they were popular prior to the war, which is disturbing on multiple levels. And I think they got in trouble for tax issues. Again, it's the Al Capone way to take out an organization. Also, when we went to war, clearly they fell out of favor for a whole bunch of reasons. But yeah, there have been comics that have taken this on, and in the comic run of Captain America around 2015, where Sam is Cap, he's basically got a Kickstarter GoFundMe to help support his superhero exploits, and he's taking on white nationalists at the U.S. border who are harming refugees, and like there were people on cable news who got very upset about that. It's like, again, my reaction to that is humbly, screw you. Like, we're supposed to be the good guys. We're supposed to help refugees. And if you want to get biblical, there's that passage about helping the foreigner. But I'm old fashioned.
All-Star Comics #7, which I want to think it's 41 or 42. I'm trying to remember what year it was. It might have even been as late as 43. It's probably 1942. But All-Star 7, again, we're trying to figure out, the comic book companies are trying to figure out, how do we deal with a world war?
Yeah.
We have superheroes, because wouldn't it be really easy for Superman to just fly over there and grab Hitler and war's over? And obviously they never did that, other than Siegel and Schuster did an insert in, oh gosh, was it Esquire? I'm blanking. I should know this. But they did an insert in an adult magazine, not adult magazine sexual, adult readership magazine, a comic book insert where they actually, Superman grabbed Hitler and brought him, and they was tried before an international tribunal like Nuremberg. And this is why actually Goebbels, the propaganda minister of Nazi Germany, actually declared Superman to be an enemy and Siegel and Schuster to be enemies. They were both Jewish, are Jewish, as enemies of the Nazi Germany because of this. But All-Star 7, what is so interesting about it is that the Justice Society of America sneaks into Eastern Europe and Nazi Germany area to bring food to the refugees and then sneak back out. They don't take on the Germans or anything like that. They sneak in to go bring food and they leave. All the top superheroes of the world who could pummel Nazi Germany in a day.
Yeah, why take out that Panzer division when we could just feed people instead and leave it to our boys to do the hard work. One of the Superman documentaries I remember watching, like they talked about how they were trying to figure out how do we deal with this. And, the covers of the comics would be like Superman coming out of U-boat, through the periscope view, but the story had nothing to do with that. And so so the covers would be like propaganda-like, or, inspiring of Nazis are bad, fascism bad, Imperial Japan bad, but not denigrate U.S. forces by, just having the superheroes steamroll over, the Third Reich.
No, they couldn't. I mean, how could they do it? Because the kids who were reading the comics, their dads, their uncles, more so than obviously their moms and their aunts, their dads and their uncles were over there fighting and being killed. And so, to read that the superheroes, I suppose, could save everybody so easily and weren't, or when it's not realistic, not that this was realistic anyway, it's comic books, but still, and obviously the comic books did, all of them sold war bonds, and there are some great classic covers of selling Batman. I have in my mind Batman and Robin cover, I think like issue 17. Walt Disney Comics and Stories was selling war bonds on the covers, in fact. But I knew Joe Simon in the last couple of years of his life, who co-created with Jack Kirby Captain America. And I asked him once, Joe Simon and Kirby were both Jewish, and I asked, the fact that you have Captain America punching Adolf Hitler, and again, before we're even in the war by almost a year, because even though the issue came out in March of 41, well, I'm sorry, it was dated March of 41, it came out earlier. Well, it came out 3 months earlier, so it was on the stands for kids to buy in like December 1940, right? We didn't go to the war, into the war for a year. And so I asked, many of the comic book writers, this is another topic, the comic book writers and artists were Jewish because they couldn't get into advertising. They went into comic books. A ton of Stan Lee, Jack. They're all Jewish. Most of the owners, most of the writers, most of the artists. And so I asked them, did you create that cover, some to extent out of a pride of Jews? Now, we didn't know about the concentration camps, but we knew about the Nuremberg laws and Kristallnacht and everything that was happening. Is that why Captain America is punching? Is it you, Joe Simon, Jack Kirby, as Jews hitting back to Hitler? And the response was, no, we knew that cover would sell.
It was just the right thing to do. It felt right. It felt right to punch Hitler. And I'm okay with that. It's fascinating. And again, that's we can talk later or more about what it was like to actually chat with him. Because I know he lived to see the first movie of the first Avenger.
I want to say he died. He was like 99.
Yeah. And
I met him when he was 96, 97.
Yeah, there was some interview comment where he, after walking out the first Avenger, was, "That's right."
I went to his apartment in New York City, and it's a small. I mean, it's New York City. It's a small apartment. Look, these guys did not make a lot of money. I think Marvel treated him well in his later years. He actually ended up having to sue. And I have one of the exhibits from his lawsuit. I have a Captain America 25, which would be from like 1943, that has an exhibit stamp on it from the court. It's great. So I think he was doing fine in his older years, but he lived in this small 1-bedroom apartment. I mean, it was nice in a nice section of New York, but it was piled high with books everywhere. Like you couldn't walk around. at all. It was just superhero books and everything all over the place, and mostly modern stuff. He didn't. It wasn't like he had all of his original art for 80 years worth of stuff. No, that stuff's all long gone, unfortunately. But he would do recreation drawings and everything, and he was sharp. He was really sharp at 96, 97 years old. It was an unbelievable honor to be with the father of Captain America.
Yeah, that's amazing. The Jillian Kirby's granddaughter, who again, she's like in her 20-something college, so she never actually met Granddad. Like she's spearheaded the Kirby for Heroes, the Hero Initiative to help comic book creators, and they do good work. And when we did the mock trial of the Winter Soldier, unbeknownst to me at the time, the person who we had a jury and we pulled people out of the audience. It was the gentleman who manages the Kirby estate was the foreman for our mock trial. I didn't know that until afterwards because his was the next panel, and I've made points to see his panels at Comic-Con and WonderCon because he does the Kirby appreciation panels, and he's so cool and it's good, and like he believes in Jack's work. So there's a lot of good folks out there honoring these legends. And and again, the show, legal issues aside, they I think do a good job of honoring the characters and what Cap represents. Because we do have Carly talking about the shield should be destroyed. And that makes my blood kind of boil because we do need heroic symbols, and a symbol is what you make it. Like Walker denigrates it by, if he hadn't taken the super soldier serum, he probably would have been an acceptable Captain America. The fact that he took a drug and it made him psychotic. No, we can't do that. Which gets us to the thing that really gave me high blood pressure about this, and that's the Patch Act. And I'm going to refine my post because I do sound like, angry liberal writer because this thing is just so horrific with what it is. But we have a new body that's kind of like the UN, that's the Global Repatriation Council, and their job is just to restore borders. And they have the U.S. representative to it as a U.S. senator. Same U.S. senator we've seen before. So again, they're out of actors. Pay somebody else scale to be the ambassador, because again, that makes no sense for a senator to be there. We don't send senators to the UN to chair committees. That's not their job. Just what the hell? So they're debating this act that would forcibly remove people from where they've settled post-blip, post-snap, and send them back to their countries of origin. Well, that's wrong on a whole bunch of levels. And again, immediately I start thinking Trail of Tears, and we don't use the military to just uproot and put people on trains. That should bother everybody, the fact that they're talking about this in a meaningful way. But the other fact is, this is just backwards, because it's not the people who stayed who are calling the shots. It's the people who vanished and then returned or forcibly expelling the survivors. That doesn't make sense legally, because that means probate either was ignored, there was just abandoned property hoping that 50% of the planet's population would come back. What the hell was happening to bank accounts? Were they just there accruing interest, or were they probated in some way? So it makes sense for people who come back 5 years later to have nothing because their material possessions and money has been distributed to their heirs, or maybe eschewed to the state. Like, that makes sense. But it doesn't make sense to screw the survivors. which is part of the reason why having camps for survivors who are being thrown out of their homes from where they've lived for anywhere from 1 day to 5 years before the Avengers, saved the day. So that's wrong. But the GRC is effectively debating a treaty. We are not a world government. The US Senate would need to ratify said treaty. So like, just because a global organization says like, okay, we've agreed to a treaty, the US is a signatory, it still needs to get through the US Senate. And the fact that this would be, and the senators bragging about this, having the US military remove people from where they currently are all over the planet and send them back to their countries of origin, well, that's just messed up. And here's why. One, we get the Posse Comitatus Act, because again, if we're having the US military throw people out of the United States, that sounds like law enforcement. There is zero due process of law in the United States if we're just rounding people up because of their natural origin and shipping them away. And ratifying a treaty that's illegal under US law doesn't make it legal. For example, let's just say that the GRC decided to enact a law that said, no more voting for women. Sorry, you can't do that anymore, ladies. The GRC has spoken. That wouldn't be law, because it would violate the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, which prohibits discrimination based on voting, based on gender. So just because somebody wants to make it a treaty, you can't violate the law on top of it. You also get the weird issue of the senators, not the president, and you have the War Powers Act to contend with as well. So again, it's all kind of messed up.
The problem is the return of everyone has not been addressed in any meaningful context. All we know is, in the last Avengers movie, there's two, or as I'm just thinking back, two indications of kind of, no, just be one. I was thinking first when Scott Lang came back, but he didn't. He just came back from the sub-universe. So presumably, no, I don't even know. I mean, do we know? I'm just trying to think. At the end of the movie, when everybody comes back and they all just all the superheroes happen to come back exactly where they're needed in order to fight Thanos. How did that necessarily come about? Unless maybe that, when Stark went, it's all in his mind. He's like, okay, bring all the superheroes to me right now. Presumably we always thought it's like return everyone who disappeared. So the question is, did they not return back to where they were when they disappeared? So where are all these refugees coming from? Didn't they just show up back in their old homes exactly where they were when they disappeared? There shouldn't be any refugees. Everybody should be at home.
Yeah, and that's so the refugees are the people who were living in the apartments or houses that had been vacated by the people who vanished. And the fact that we know people reappear where they disappeared from is from both WandaVision and also Spider-Man Far From Home. Aunt May returns to her apartment and finds there are other people living in her apartment going like, well, this is awkward. Like, who are you? And 5 years have passed. For Monica Rambeau, she reappears in the hospital room where she was visiting her mom. And she finds out that her mom's been dead for 3 years and she's been missing for 5. So then you throw in the Far From Home factor that Aunt May is doing a fundraiser for people who vanished and then came back and they have to rebuild their lives, which is the logical thing that would happen, because Aunt May showing up to her apartment 5 years later and there's new people living there, she can't tell them, get out. Like, she can't throw those folks out. Now, it'd be one thing if people showed up back home at their homes and like their kids were running the show. It's just like, grandpa and grandma came back and like They find out that their son and his wife are in the master bedroom now. It's like, all the furniture's changed and they remodeled. Like, it'd be like, what the hell happened? Like, we blinked and now everything's different. But this is why the Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think, just have it backwards, because the people getting screwed would be the people who vanished. It would not be, because it's like, so their bank account stayed in place. They come back 5 years later and they still have the power that they had from money or whatever. So again, that just, for me, it's like, that's the biggest problem with this, because they're trying to make the flag smashers sympathetic. And it's like you can't appeal to both MAGA people and, we'll paint them as like MAGA people trying to overthrow the US Capitol, or we want them to look like Antifa people, throwing Molotov cocktails. And like, trying to cater to both audiences at the same time doesn't work. They need to pick one. And the fact that they doubled down on, we're going to talk about the ugly issues with race that make people uncomfortable, the fact that they wouldn't go, the next step is just weird, and it's really made for some
you saw
bizarre
a little bit at the end where, I don't remember the character's name, but when Batroc, and we'll have to see what the heck Sharon Carter and Batroc's relationship is, and that's not going to help her with her pardon if Sam and Bucky ever remember, if that storyline even gets furthered. But when they're in the park, it looks like they're right by Central Park, I guess, in New York City. And the one guy is like, "Oh, okay, we're dealing with criminals now." That really, because he's clearly, his view is we are sort of we are noble revolutionaries. We are fighting the good, honorable fight, and this guy Batroc, he's nothing but a terrorist criminal. And then, of course, Callie's response was, don't you know we're criminals too?
Clearly, like, if you go around murdering people, you're the bad
innocent
guy.
people, which
like
was from the episode before where they were bombing the buildings and just blowing them up. It's like, you're well, I mean, I've dealt with terrorists, and one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. So
yeah, and again, they're trying to have it both ways from the storytelling perspective, and it's just, I mean, I appreciate the fact that they deviated from the villains who just want chaos for the sake of chaos. Which is why I like Wilson Fisk, who does aggressive urban renewal, trying to make New York a better place. Okay, still wrong, still a psychopath, but his goal is not global domination or an extinction event. And Zemo, again, hates the Avengers, and technically he's the villain that's successful, because the Avengers are left in ruins at the end of Civil War. He won, despite the fact ending up in a prison cell. He accomplished his goals, and that's the dark part of Civil War. He technically won. This, I mean, I get where they're trying to go, but it's just so sloppy, because it's the wrong have-not. If they were representing the returned, and the returned are the people who were screwed, that would be different. But it's not, and this doesn't fit. So, if we just get fun superhero smash at the end, maybe that will make up for it. But again, this is one of those things that was making me have high blood pressure at the end of the episode, going like, that doesn't make sense.
The more I think about it, as we drill down in so much of these episodes, I'm almost dreading the final 6th episode, because I don't know how, in 50 to 60 minutes time, they're going to tie everything in a nice knot, or nice bow tie that will explain everything. I mean, I look clearly, because this is the way things work. They're going to create lots of cliffhangers and offshoots where they can decide, if it's not already in the works, to do this series going this way, this series going that way, this series going this way. We can turn this into an actual movie, or we can do it Disney Plus, whatever. There's going to be lots of different things that they're going to be able to do in the coming years, and Disney is a master at doing that, and they're money makers. So the fact of the matter is, we're probably going to be, in a good way, as fan base, we're going to be getting lots of these movies and TV shows, maybe animation, maybe live action, maybe both, who knows, in the coming years. The biggest problem actually is probably going to be that not all of these actors are going to be able to continue to play their characters. At some point in time, they're going to have to switch them to somebody younger, because I mean, right? We have Harrison Ford coming out in another Indiana Jones film. The guy's 80 freaking years old. I don't want to see this film. I went to the original one in 1981. I know, and the third one sucked, as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to go see another Indiana Jones film. But there's going to be so much, and I'm a little concerned the final episode is maybe possibly going to be more disappointing than anything else, because there's a lot to do in the final hour.
Yeah, I share your concern. Like I did a little math. So Sam's in Louisiana, one of the port cities, and the distance from New Orleans to New York is 1,304 miles. And that's from New Orleans to New York City. For giggles, the top speed of the SR-71 was 2,193 miles per hour. In order for Sam to get to New York in 30 minutes, he would have to be traveling at 2,608 miles per hour, which is like Mach 6. And because Mach 1 is 767 miles per hour. And so that would be Mach 3-ish, Mach 3 and change. For Sam to get to New York in 12 minutes, because again, things are starting to go down at the GRC and he still needs to change. A 12-minute flight would be 6,520 miles per hour, which again, in excess of Mach 6. Like, that's faster than the X-15 ever accomplished. And the human body can't just take that. So whatever Wakandin flight suit he has, he could end up as jelly. So that by itself gives me pause.
That brings up into my mind two things. There are these two great books, I think they were published in the 90s, the science fiction of superheroes, the science fiction of supervillains. And what it does is go through the physics of our superheroes and their feats and what they have done in the storylines, and really could it be done. So the one example that always I cite to, that's always on my mind, is Superman, which he did commonly in the 40s and the 50s, carrying an ocean liner in his hands.
It doesn't snap.
Physically, the ocean liners are 900 feet long. Could he lift it? Yes, he could lift the weight of it, but the ocean liner would crack in half from a physical standpoint, right?
Yeah.
And then, the other notion of exactly what you're kind of talking about with, this always bothers me, these non-superhero guys, even Captain America. All right, I get it. The super serum made him really, really strong. But dude, you can't fall from a 12-story building and survive. I'm sorry. Your bones are not made of vibranium now or something. You're just super strong. But no, your legs would be crushed like that. I don't care about your gymnastics ability. And I have a feeling the question or the issue you're raising is going to be so simply resolved in the next episode, much in the same way that if you ever saw the movie True Lies with Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1994, which is just a comedy spy film, Jamie Lee Curtis, Arnold Schwarzenegger. But there's a scene in there that resonates with me because it's filmed in Washington, D.C., where I am. And at one point, he's on a horse, Schwarzenegger, and he starts in Georgetown, and the horse jumps, and then he lands in a park in D.C. Well, it's a great scene in the film, but if you know Washington, D.C., the horse just jumped like 2 miles to go from Georgetown to, I think, like McPherson Square, or either Farragut Square or McPherson Square, which is like 2 miles away that the horse just jumped. So I have a feeling Sam is just going to New Orleans to New York. You don't have to explain it. He's just going to be there.
It makes sense for, like, say, Doctor Strange to go like, hey, need a portal? Yeah, like, that's cool. Like, I'm completely on board with that.
Explain
like,
it to me.
Hey,
I accept that. I totally accept he can do that. Yes.
Yeah, it's just, if he texts Doctor Strange, Stephen, I need a favor.
I need a ride.
And it would be, yeah, it's like, there you go, big guy, you have fun. That would make sense. Or, if Bucky's already in New York, that too makes sense since he's from there.
Brooklyn.
And it would also make sense if they let the Flag Smashers actually go through with their plans, and then it's Sam and Bucky taking them on after a mass casualty event. Like, that too makes sense. It's dark. It's kind of the 9/11 storytelling at that point, but if the Flag Smashers go on a mass killing spree, okay, then it's, then they know what they're up against. But that would be pretty un-Disney for the heroes to not save the day. But we saw Sam and Bucky not stop Walker from beheading a guy. So
yeah, it's an interesting discussion that we can have next week.
Yeah, and again, despite the fact that you and I just both ripped into this with a lot of deep analysis, I'm excited each week for this. This makes me happy.
I know. I'm excited. It's only going to be, it's over. And now we got to wait for Loki in June, I guess.
Which, again, happy. That's a high-class problem. We go from WandaVision to Falcon and Winter Soldier, then Loki. And okay, if you told me that in 1985 when I started reading comics, I would not have believed you. And it would look good. This is, we're in a golden age. So again, I love talking about this stuff with you and being able to dive deep and, and nerd out over our respective areas of expertise. But it's just, I want to go guys, if you need help, call. We were more than happy to sign an NDA and give you some feedback.
Action figures. Some autographs. I got Batman and Robin behind me, and the one on top is Dawn Wells, who sadly passed away earlier this year from Gilligan's Island, and Morgan Fairchild, who's a friend of mine who's down on the bottom.
Okay, I was wondering.
I'll work for autographs and props.
Yeah, it's just Yeah. Send me an action figure. I'm good. It's props that I can use in blog posts.
Give me one of the
wonderful
shields.
thing.
Give me the shield. I'll hang it up right behind me.
The FX toys that they're coming out with right now are phenomenal. They just had the Doctor Strange Augmenado, and I know I
I got
mispronounced that.
Thor
Uh,
here. This model. I bought a Thor collection from a friend of mine, and he came with all these Thor toys in there.
that's phenomenal. I got the FX Mjolnir, and like it's a ton of fun. I've been eyeing the Stormbreaker because it's glorious because it's the right size and lights up, and it's like, yeah, I'd mount that on the wall. Like it just like I've done with lightsabers. So again, this is the right time for Gen Xers like who grow up. And it's our generation that's helping, like in management positions, make this stuff happen. So it's I'm pretty happy. So with that, Mark, any other closing thoughts?
No, see you next week. See what happens.
Yeah. Same here. So everyone, thank you for tuning in. You can, again, follow Mark and I on our respective social media. Expect blog posts, expect more audio commentary and video, and everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and most of all, stay geeky. And we'll see you soon. Take care.